7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Howdy, CROC Nation. Dr. Tommy and Ellie here with you with another CROC Podcast. Joining me, as always, Angel Santana. Have faith, let it begin. How are you, my friend?
Everything is fine and dandy. For those of you that will eventually see this on YouTube version, you can see we have a nice little background here. Noah just joined me. Noah's excited because he saw the picture of Dr. E. CROC Nation, Dr. E. I feel good. How about you?
I'm doing great. I actually had a really great day for the people in the Northeast. This Saturday was just what we had bargained for or had always asked for, this type of weather. It's got a nice crisp breeze, but it's nice and warm, enjoying the beautiful blue skies and the warm sun and the greenery. I mean, the greens in the Hudson Valley right now are so rich, and they're so multi-layered, and there's so many different shades of green. It's a good time to be in the Hudson Valley, I would say.
Absolutely. And you know what? Today, as you said, I was visiting my wife who's doing a show outside, and she had a tent, and it was just beautiful.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I hope that our survivor thrivers were out there enjoying today. Many of them live in the Hudson Valley, so hoping that you guys enjoyed and took advantage of today. Angel, we're going to really do an interesting new thing. A lot of what we do on the CROC Podcast has to do with identifying flaws, both flaws in ourselves, flaws in the medical system, flaws in the oncology system, and flaws or shortcomings in the providers that give care to our cancer survivor thrivers. Also, the toxicities of treatment and how to manage them and their cancers and treatment specific, related podcasts as well. But what we don't usually pay much attention to, or what we don't give much energy to, are the positive stories. The stories where the doctors and the nurses and the care teams go above and beyond. So I'd like to start today a new series of podcasts called our Heroes module. So our Heroes module is very, very, I think, will be multi-textured, just like I said, the multi-texture of the greenery here in the Hudson Valley. And it was inspired over the last couple of months by a story. And again, I love our podcasts that have to do with stories about our patients. And in this case, a patient and two colleagues who stepped up and went the above and beyond. So I'm really excited to go through that and go through some things I also found out in my research in getting prepared for today's podcast. Angel, your thoughts so far?
It's great. I think it's an opportunity for us to really dig deep and just really get to know the survivor thrivers, but more importantly, just to get more in touch on a one-on-one. It feels like a one-on-one today with the CROC Nation.
Yeah, and the other thing is to put balance to the podcast. I mean, I don't want the podcast. I mean, listen, it's very important for us to give our survivor thrivers the information they need to successfully traverse their journey, which is a very difficult journey. And the road that they have to travel is a very rocky road at times. And we want to make sure they have that information, and they have I would say the education that they would know what they're entitled to. So that's important for us to do, of course. And we as physicians and nurses and caretakers of oncology patients, we certainly are in a flawed system for sure. But there are times when it's good to balance those negative stories with some positive stories. So the way I see this module developing, and again, the module will not be sequential. Next week won't be Heroes number 2, but we'll sort of, intersperse them with other podcasts. I see 4 categories. So one, of course, is the physician excellence. Physician excellence is basically you go in to see Dr. A, and there's nothing wrong with Dr. A. They're terrific. They are wonderful. They treat you well. They don't make you wait. They bring you in. They're respectful to you. They tell you what you need to know. And then you leave and you go see Dr. B. And the difference is Dr. B is just practicing on a different level, just at a level of excellence, and the outcomes are so much better. And it's not because Dr. A is bad or wrong or whatever. It's just there are some people, there are some practitioners that are just more talented than others, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way of the world. And I think that would be category one, physician excellence. Those physicians that are head and shoulders above the rest. The second category is patient advocacy. So we talk about this again all the time here on the CROC Podcast about how we need to be more than great oncologists or great nurses or great speech therapists or great nutritionists, great physical therapists. We also have to be patient advocates. We have to stand up for our survivor thrivers. And the second category of these heroes would be those caregivers, caretakers, I guess I should say, who not only excel in their clinical judgments and their clinical acumen, but also how they stand up for their patients and how they work above and beyond, outside of the call of duty, and even outside of hours, volunteering hours to help patients and survivor thrivers. The third category would be our physician leaders and pioneers. We had many interviews with pioneers and leaders. Charlie Shapiro comes to mind from Mount Sinai. Katie Deming from Portland comes to mind, and the nurses that we spoke to from overseas. All of these leaders who are on the vanguard, on the cutting edge of survivor thriver research and survivorship research, and also oncology research. And then fourth, what we're going to be talking about today is physician accountability. These are physicians that sort of step up and go on, again, above and beyond by managing mistakes and unexpected outcomes, and what I say, doing the right thing. There was a movie back in the 1980s, Do the Right Thing. It was a Spike Lee joint with, I think Spike Lee actually played Mookie. And unfortunately, Mookie did not do the right thing by inciting a riot, but we are going to encourage our survivor thrivers and our docs to do the right thing in these very unfortunate and sometimes very hard to manage situations. So we're going to start by we're going to do a little insert actually before we start the story. So the website and the blog that I read for this week's research had to do with patient safety, why doctors stay mum about mistakes or unexpected outcomes. And it's very common, believe it or not, when patients have an unexpected outcome or when a mistake is made. And I hate to tell you guys, but mistakes are made all the time. If there's an error, a lot of times our patients and their families don't even know it. And the sad thing is that their doctors and the other observing doctors do know this. So the doctors and nurses know it, but the patient doesn't. And too often, it is in this space and in this place where so many times we as professionals have either stayed silent and expertly tangoed around the issue with our big words and with our jargon, or told half-truths or outright lies just to avoid a confrontation. And too often, the observing members of the healthcare team, so not just the doctors that are making the errors or involving themselves with their patients, but the people that are observing from the sidelines and seeing what's going on, they also have stayed mum. So we need to discuss that. And there's a lot of reasons why we can see why this has been the case. As I said, not always, but all too often. Being a doctor and being part of this very elite fraternity, sorority, it was, now I'm happy to say that women and men are pretty, I would say, evenly matched in the field. I don't know the data, I could be wrong, but it feels that way at least. But it was called the Good Old Boys Club. It was a special elitist club with very limited membership. There was this unspoken bond. If I was at an airport and someone in line ahead of me would say, "Oh, I'm Dr. Smith," I would say, "Hey, Doc, I'm Dr. Iannelli." Nice to meet you. What kind of, we could just basically start a conversation and have a bond that two other people wouldn't have. And it's a very prestigious group. It's a very prestigious membership. And I said, it's almost magical. It's almost, we share this magical bond together. So you could see that this membership, you would be afraid to have this membership card revoked if we sort of quote unquote ratted out a colleague. And many of our colleagues are also our friends. We socialize with them. We are in the trenches with them. We're in the foxholes with them. So of course, we don't want to rat them out, quote unquote, but that's, getting ahead of ourselves. We also have to look at the fact that physicians rely on referrals. And if a physician is going to embarrass another physician, there may be ramifications with the referral patterns. And that could fiscally, jeopardize, the physician's practice. There's also the malpractice aspect where physicians that are kind of watching this car accident occur, they just want to stay as far away from the case as possible in case there's any litigation. They do not want to be in the chart. They don't want to be involved. It's almost as if, when something bad happens in an apartment complex in the city and everybody kind of looks at it out their windows, but when the police come to try to question you, no one sees anything, right? They don't want to get involved. And that's unfortunate. And then there's outright hostility. Not so much anymore, I'm happy to report, but there is still this possibility that the physician that's being called out on their mistake might try to come after you in some way and be hostile. I'm not saying they're going to go to your house and start a fight and beat you up, but there is the possibility of some hostility. So I'm going to begin this podcast by going through what our ethical duty is as physicians and nurses. And I was very lucky, Angel. Very early in my career, I actually caught a mistake that was made by none other than Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. So we live and work very close to New York City. We share patients from these tertiary care centers, and I happen to be sharing a case from Memorial, which is probably the most, if not the second most prestigious cancer center in the entire world. And I picked up a mistake. Now, I'm happy to report that the mistake wasn't a big mistake. It wasn't something that was going to jeopardize the patient, but it was a mistake nonetheless. So when I brought it to their attention, again, I did the right thing, thankfully. I was shocked. I was thinking that they were going to absolutely berate me, that they were going to put me down. Who are you? Some hillbilly country doctor telling us, that we're wrong. And it was absolutely the opposite. They embraced me. They were thankful. Their process was something to see, Angel. They called the patient in for a meeting. They had, supervisors and administrators and patient safety and quality people at the meeting. They explained the situation to the patient very thoroughly. They did a root cause analysis. They put together a quality improvement plan and involved the patient in that plan. They apologized. Think about this, a doctor apologizing to a patient. And they also put a plan together to cure the error. So I was really very lucky to be able to see that, and not only just see that in any ordinary hospital system, but in a hospital as prestigious as Memorial, which I always tell my patients that we practice so close to the city that it is really our obligation to practice at that same level. And I really try to hold our department to that to the best of my ability. And also, we have to forget, we can't forget that doctors are first and foremost, we're human. We are flesh and blood. We are mistake prone. We have to confront our imperfections, and we have to expose our vulnerabilities to our patients. And this is very difficult for us to do because we're sometimes placed in a pedestal. We're placed in a leadership role. We're placed almost in a role of the healer, of the curer, the person to cure this horrible disease. And there's a trust that develops, and we would hate to see that trust destroyed when we have to point out that an error has been made or that an outcome that was unexpected occurred. And it's such a trust that these patients actually put their lives in our hands. So it is difficult for us to deal with these types of situations. And I just want to make sure that we go through that before we actually go to the story and go to the the inspiring redemption of what I hope you guys will find equally as inspiring. Angel, any thoughts so far?
I just think it's fascinating that, as a person who is a manager, well, not manager, let me take that back, a leader in my role, I'm always so quick to tell people that when you make a mistake, you own it. And when you own it, you deliver it, and when you move on from it. And I agree with you. When you were explaining the error, the first thing I said was, uh-oh, what was that going to be like? What kind of backlash? So, big kudos to them. They were able to sit back and go, okay, let's put the ego to the door. Let's check the ego. Let's, remove the chip from the shoulder and work together as a team. That's the key ingredient that is missing in most places. And just to hear that means there's hope.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I just want to, before I start the story, some of these hero stories will be identified, meaning that sometimes the doctor or nurse will want to be identified or be happy to be identified, and sometimes they don't want to or they don't feel comfortable. So I am not going to identify the players in this particular story, but at other times, if they feel comfortable, I will do that. So the story started about 2 months ago when I got a call from one of my favorite breast radiologists, and she gave me a holler, and she said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about a case." And we started talking about the case, and she said, "There's something on the follow-up mammogram that I don't like." And I go, "Well, what are you talking about? This patient just completed therapy. She just had her surgery. She just had her radiation. This schmutz that you're mentioning, this has to be post-treatment scarring. I mean, there's no possible way that this could be, persistent cancer. There should be no cancer in her breast. What are you talking about?" So, that's kind of the way the story starts. And I have to tell you, my response was I was very disappointed with my response in the sense that it was a very knee-jerk response. And it was very reasonable. I mean, it was post-treatment related changes 99 times out of 100. These are treatment related changes, and you can't really tell the difference. And because of the fact that the patient had just completed therapy, the likelihood of this being a problem was, as small as possible. And I didn't even entertain the possibility that there could have been an irregularity, and I was wrong. So I am and one of the reasons why this is a hero module, or I'm sorry, a hero episode, is because this practitioner, in my mind, was a hero. She really did not take what I said to heart. She did not let it, slow her process down or change her investigatory approach to this and her skepticism, which I had lost my skepticism. And then she called the surgeon, who had the exact same knee-jerk reaction that I did. And and one of the reasons why I think I was so not apt to believe the radiologist was also the surgeon was spectacular. I've worked with the surgeon a million times, and this surgeon is world class. And so I'm thinking, the possibilities that there could have been an unexpected outcome are like as close to zero as you can be. And then, this practitioner, this breast radiologist, she didn't let it go, Angel. She just kept moving forward and pressing and getting more films and getting more views. And even though the two clinicians taking care of the patient were not supporting her or receptive to her thoughts, she kept pushing. And it wasn't because we were trying to hide anything. We had talked about that article, that blog about, mum's the word and protecting your colleagues and all that kind of thing. This was not a case of that at all, although I did want to kind of add that to the podcast as being a problem in our system. But it was more just that we lost our sense of being skeptical. And it's always required. You said you have to check your ego at the door. You can't check your skepticism at the door. You always have to be that. We're not just clinicians. We're not just educators. We're also scientists. And we have to, be true to the scientific method. And that's what differentiates a good doctor from a great doctor. And we kind of lost that for a split second. It wasn't long. And thank God again for hero number one. There's actually 3 heroes to this story. Because we just didn't believe it was possible that this patient could still have, some, small amount of cancer in her breast. And it was cut out, it was radiated, and the findings were vague. So it was a very reasonable position, but it turned out not to be the right position. And here's the cool part. 9 out of 10 doctors would have just dropped it. They would have just said, okay, let's repeat this. I talked to your doctors, I talked to your radiation oncologist, I talked to your surgeon. They're not, concerned. Let's just repeat this in 4 months. Let's repeat it in 6 months. She absolutely didn't. So when the doctor called me the second time, that's when my ears started, that's where the hair on my neck started to stand up. And I said, you know what, if you're that concerned, you know what, I'm changing my position. Let's go after this. Let's absolutely continue to search and do more x-rays, and let's do a biopsy. And both me and the surgeon, we changed our tunes. We said, let's go after this. Let's be aggressive and let's put a needle in this thing. And lo and behold, the needle biopsy came out as positive. So here's a hero number 2. So we talked about hero number 1. Hero number 2 is the surgeon. So the call that every caring doctor hates to make, the one when we are expecting an outcome to happen, hoping an outcome to happen, have seen the outcome happen 99 times out of 100, doesn't happen. I remember the first time I had to make that call, and any doctor who tells you they haven't had to make this call is either lying to you or they're lying to themselves. And it was very, very difficult. And I always say to students and residents, and even to people on this podcast, and Angel, you probably recall, great doctors never remember the 99 times we stole life out of the jaws of death, but instead remember the one time we failed. And the surgeon did a terrific job, a perfect job, brought the patient in face to face, brought in their family in a very expedited way. So the patient didn't have to wait, and graciously, empathetically, thoroughly went through the process, went through the failure, the reason for the failure, how to fix the failure. And that brings us to hero number 3. Hero number 3 is the patient. The patient handled the news with great dignity and actually had compassion toward the surgeon. I'm going to quote what the husband said to the surgeon. That must have been very hard for you to tell us this news. So that patient actually felt bad for the surgeon who had to tell them the bad news. And they did not dwell on the past. They didn't dwell on the unexpected outcome, but they focused and concentrated on the future and what needed to be done for their cancer to be cured and for them to be cancer-free once again. And the final point on this particular story, I told the patient the story of Hero 1, the radiologist, and I told her that we didn't believe her. I told her that despite our protestations, which were, as I said, very reasonable, the doctor would not back down, would not relent. And the next day, hero number 3, who is the patient, sent hero number 1, the radiologist, a box of gourmet cookies. So the moral of the story is to stick to your guns, stick to your gut, believe your instincts, never waver, always put the patient first, be a stand-up practitioner, be accountable, be ethical, both for yourself and for your colleagues. Do a Memorial Sloan Kettering. Be thorough and pure with your process. And if you do the right thing, not only will you regain the patient's trust and respect, but you will be able to look at yourself in the mirror. Angel Santana, your thoughts?
Wow. To reference the 1989 movie of Do the Right Thing, and then to, tie that all in, it goes back to when I was a child. we were always taught that you have to tell the truth. Don't, it's that old story about the, crying the sheep, or is it crying sheep? I forget the story.
Crying wolf.
Crying wolf, excuse me. It's the opposite. And then to hear that's why I kept thinking about, in that process is saying, wow, I remember this when we were younger. So the message goes back to something that we were taught from day one, and that is the truth. And then when you get into an older age and you get wiser, you realize that in a biblical term, it says the truth shall set you free. So when you tell the truth, when you are humbling, when you take ownership of something, the chances are things will work out to your advantage. And kudos to those heroes. God bless them. And for anyone today that's listening and maybe is torn by a decision that you're probably in right now, learn from this and do the right thing.
Angel Santana and Have Faith, Let It Begin. Thank you so much for your keen insights, your wisdom, and for being such an amazing co-host, and also just being so wonderful for our Survivor Thrivers. I want everybody to know this is the part where we kind of do our pep talk. When you go through your process, you have to always be your best advocate. Your physicians, your nurses, your care team, we do everything possible. And I really have seldom, if ever, seen anybody who is not doing this for the right reason and is not trying to put your interests first. But we are human. We do make mistakes. And I want you guys to be questioning. I want you to be skeptical as well. I want you guys to ask those hard questions. And I want you to make sure that you always know what's going on with your care. In this case, it was just a very, very wonderful practitioner, and we were very lucky to have this colleague be able to continue to investigate and follow her gut. And I pray that each of you, as a Survivor Thriver, have those types of practitioners take care of you. If an error does happen or an unexpected outcome, I am also praying that you will have a team that will be honest with you and put your interests ahead of theirs. And I hope that you also have practitioners who may not be directly involved in your care, but may be observing your care, to also stand up and advocate for you so the right thing can be done and you can be treated in the proper way in order to turn an unexpected outcome into an expected outcome, which is your cure. These are the types of podcasts that are difficult. These are the types of podcasts that underline and highlight the imperfections of our humanity. These are the types of podcasts where doctors are taken down from their throne and actually humanized. And I think that's okay. I never want any of our Survivor Thrivers to think too highly or too lowly of us. You can respect us, you could trust us, and you could hope that we're doing the right thing and the best medicine for you. But at the same time, always stand up for yourself, ask the questions, be your self-advocate. And we will end this podcast as we end every CROC podcast, and that is with a blessing. And that blessing is to wish each and every one of you a long, healthy, happy, and cancer-free life. Enjoy the weather, enjoy the greenery, and do the right thing. God bless you. Peace.